News number one, I'm Trey Wingo. The baseball season, yeah, it may be a marathon, but it's the sprint at the end that stirs our passion. The drive to the finish, the pursuit of the pennant, the knowing that each game becomes more important than the one before. Scoreboard watching is all the rage. Spitting, scratching, and chewing reach new heights of frenzy. Now, true, some of the suspense has been siphoned off by the realignment and the addition of wild cards, and that's reflected in the list voted on by ESPN Classic. You'll see that is tinged with nostalgia. But then that, too, seems fitting, for part of baseball's allure has always been its rich history. Here, then, the 20 best pennant races ever.
2020.
The 1914 National League pennant race was just epic. The Braves had no business being in the pennant race.
It's remembered because they were in last place in July.
The 1914 Braves were dead last on July 16th, floundering 11 and a half games behind the first-place Giants. Then, led by left-handed slugger Joe Connolly, Boston finished the season on a 61-16 rampage to leapfrog over the entire National League and win the pennant by 10 and a half games.
2020.
The manager of the Braves that year was George Stallings. His slogan was, "You can win, you must win, you will win."
They went from worst to first, then went out and won everything, won the World Series. Those things are good for baseball, and things like that keep people interested in the game.
It looked almost impossible for them to come back and win it, and they did. That is why they named them the 1914 Miracle Braves.
19.
In 1908, the American League pennant race was a three-team affair between Detroit, Chicago, and Cleveland. When the Tigers' wild Bill Donovan shut out the White Sox on the final day, Detroit won the flag by half a game over the Indians, as it benefited from not being required to make up a rainout. Ty Cobb led the league with a .324 average and 108 runs batted in.
The Tigers were in the midst of winning the pennant 3 straight years, like 07, 8, and 09, and Ty Cobb was in his ascendancy then.
He could actually point out where he was going to hit the ball. He could decide when the pitch was coming, whether he wanted to go left field with it, whether he wanted to drag bunt with it, whether he was going to hit it in the gap.
You win no matter how. We know about Rose bumping into that catcher and knocking him out. No. Ty Cobb would kill these guys to win a game.
Day to day, those 3 teams were close together all season long. It was one of the great baseball seasons ever.
18.
The 1904 American League pennant race. The Boston Pilgrims and the New York Highlanders.
That season gets lost in history because there was no World Series.
What makes the 1904 pennant race memorable is that wild pitch on the last day of the season.
For the last 2 months of the 1904 season, Boston with Cy Young and New York with Jack Chesbro were locked in a fierce race.
The New York Highlanders nearly won a pennant in their second year.
They won 92 games. They were challenging the Pilgrims for the pennant.
They have a 41-game winner, which is not bad, a fellow named Jack Chesbro. But Chesbro is their fortune and their misfortune.
On the last day of the season, the teams had a doubleheader against each other. New York would have had to sweep in order to take the pennant. In the first game, Chesbro threw a pitch over the head of the catcher, and Boston won the pennant.
It's sort of like the reverse of all the American League history to come.
It's the first real American League pennant race, and look who it is. The Boston Pilgrims would become the Red Sox, and the New York Highlanders would become the Yankees.
In the National League, the champion Giants arrogantly dismissed the fledgling American League as bush and refused to play Boston. It would be the only season without a World Series until 1994.
17.
The Cardinals and the Dodgers, probably the greatest rivalry in baseball in the 1940s.
Dodgers, they had great ball clubs in the 40s. It was always great competition to play them guys.
It was a great pennant race, and they wind up in a tie.
From July of 1946 to the last regular season game, the old rivals were in lockstep. When both lost their final contest, they finished with 96 wins apiece, creating the first tie in Major League history and forcing a best-of-3 playoff. St. Louis beat Brooklyn in 2.
It was just the beginning of that Dodger post-war era, and it was the last pennant where the Cardinals would win for 18 years.
We weren't supposed to win it. I think the Dodgers were supposed to win it.
The Dodgers chose to start on the road, and they never got back from behind that.
And the Dodgers were left with egg on their faces. The Cardinals won the 1946 pennant.
16.
The 1980 Phillies were one of those teams that you just knew they belonged in the World Series.
Before getting there by beating the Astros in the NLCS, the Phillies had to get past the Expos in the East. The two were tied going into the final 3 games of the 1980 season, and they played head-to-head in Montreal. Philadelphia won the first contest, then clinched the division in the 11th inning of Game 2.
They were virtually out of it. And they weren't talking to the media, and you had Dallas Green kind of prodding them like a jockey.
There was a change of managers, and Dallas Green was our leader, and the Big Bopper was his nickname, and he was very tough, very hard to get along with. But Steve Carlton, he was the horse with the ball the whole time.
You could count on not needing 6, 7, 8, 9 runs to win a ball game every 5th day when it was Steve Carlton's day to pitch.
He was the Mike Schmidt on the mound for the Philadelphia Phillies, and I thought that Mike Schmidt's performance in 1980 was just extraordinary.
I remember going into that final weekend series. In Game 2, which was the clincher, the Phillies have a runner on second base, and Mike Schmidt was at the plate. And Stan Bonson shook me 3 times, and he went to the fastball, and I called for the pitch away to not throw it down the middle, but he did.
Long drive, White net, baby! Way out of here! Home run! Mike Schmidt! Phillies lead 6-4!
He was man enough to understand, I have this God-given talent, and I have the ability to strap this team on my back.
Oh, what a drive by Schmidt! Unbelievable!
And they're going to follow me into the promised land, and we're going to win.
15.
The Phillies just put it all together. They were the whiz kids. They had a bunch of young guys.
Curt Simmons was their best pitcher that year, but he got drafted in the Korean War.
It left it pretty much up to Robin Roberts to carry the pitching load, and that's exactly what he did.
The Cardinals lost 4 straight the final week of the 1949 season, and the Dodgers, with MVP Jackie Robinson and Rookie of the Year Don Newcombe, capitalized and took a 1-game lead into Philadelphia on the last day.
We were 1 game ahead with 1 game left. If we had lost that game, it would have been a playoff. It was 10 innings, and in the top of the 10th, Sisler hit a 3-run homer, and I got him out in the bottom of the inning.
The Dodgers had been riding Sisler all game long. Sisler had a speech impediment, a stutter. And of course, as he's running around the bases and he's still stuttering, but now he's got a smile on his face, he's yelling to the Dodger bench in a stutter, how do you like this?
If you're a baseball fan, you can look back and say, it's wonderful if Philadelphia did win that one. That was their year.
If you'd analyzed it, player by player, it would find it hard to imagine we could win the pennant, but we did, and those things do happen.
Nothing will ever equal 1969 in the Miracle Mets. The team had never had a winning season.
Punch into left field, it's going to be in there! It's a base hit, and the Mets win the ball game!
100-to-1 shot when the season starts.
This is impossible. This is impossible.
So for the first time in the history of the New York Mets, they have gone into first place.
9th place in 1968.
Who are these guys?
In the last 2 months of the 1969 season, the Cubs lived up to their angst-ridden history and wilted. They lost 11 of 12 in one key stretch and finished 8 games behind the Mets. Cy Young Award winner Tom Seaver won 9 times after August 15th on his way to a 25-7 record to spark New York.
It was unbelievable.
Whenever I think of the 69 race, I think of the Black Cat coming out on the field in front of the Cubs dugout at Shea Stadium. Given the Cubs' history, you couldn't disregard it.
Leo DeRocha was the manager of the Cubs. They played only day baseball in Chicago in those days, and I think the Cubs were a very tired team.
They were a better team than the Mets. They probably should have won that year. The Mets just had a certain magic about them.
But nobody believed the Mets at that time. They had been so bad for so long, and Gil Hodges gave them a sense of confidence.
To me, they're the ultimate underdog. If you're talking about any sport or you want to make any analogy to life of a person facing long odds, the baseball analogy to me is the '69 Mets.
The Dodgers, of course, had won their only World Series in '55 against the Yankees. They come back in '56. It turns out it's Jackie Robinson's last season.
The feeling was, some of these stars we have are getting a little older. This might be the last crack.
Going into the final week of the 1956 season, 3 National League teams were bunched within a game and a half of each other. On the last weekend, the Dodgers swept the Pirates to overtake the Braves, who lost 2 of 3 to St. Louis and finished a game back. Cincinnati's 8-1 finish wasn't enough.
The Reds had been building. The Reds had a slugging team. They had 221 home runs that year that tied the Giants' record that had been set in 1947.
But Milwaukee is building as a team. Warren Spahn is the best left-hander in the National League. They have the great Eddie Matthews, and of course they have a young kid by the name of Henry Aaron. It looked like Milwaukee was going to bust this thing up and really run away from the Dodgers, but somehow or other the Dodgers were able to hang on and win this very close pennant race.
It was as great and dramatic a season as they had in their entire history in Brooklyn.
It was very clear that they were still the dominant team. It was the last year of Dodger greatness in Brooklyn.
12.
The Dodgers had a 10-game lead in August and let it slip away.
They won 104 games, which ordinarily would be enough to run away with the pennant, but the young Cardinal team won 106 games.
From out of nowhere they came, the Cardinals of 1942. On August 7th, they were 9.5 games behind first-place Brooklyn. St. Louis thundered home from there, going 43-8, including winning 12 of the last 13 to take the pennant by 2 games over the Dodgers. And rookie Stan Musial led the charge.
12.
Those Cardinals were not going to lose. There was one point down the stretch in September where the Dodgers won 9 or 10 games in a row and lost ground.
That 42 club was voted one of the best Cardinal clubs ever. We had a great spirit among the Cardinal players. We were together.
Musial was a rookie in 1942, and he hit .315, which was 3rd in the National League. Without him, the Dodgers would have had another pennant. The Cardinals would not.
11.
1962 was really a fascinating pennant race.
That was the very peak time for the San Francisco-Los Angeles rivalry. I mean, the Giants were a very, very, very strong team, and probably were all around a better team than the Dodgers.
We never thought they were better than we were. We had McCovey, Cepeda, Mays, Marichal. There's 4 guys right there that were voted in the Hall of Fame.
After chasing them for the last 3 months of the '62 season, the Giants finally caught the Dodgers on the last day, forcing a best-of-3 playoff. They split the first 2, and L.A. took a 4-2 lead in the top of the 9th of Game 3, but walks and Dodger mistakes aided San Fran's comeback.
11.
Stan Williams was a relief pitcher for the Dodgers, and he came into the game.
And the most memorable thing there is that Stan Williams walked home for winning runs.
The Dodgers once again found ways to not win, and it was just a classic collapse. And we Dodger fans thought that we led the league in that.
2 down, Giants 6, Dodgers 4, bottom of the 9th. Here's one. Here's the pitch. A line drive to center. This could be it. Mays waiting. He's got it. The Giants win the pennant.
For them to win that series was dramatic. And I think what made that pennant race was that the Giant-Dodger rivalry was still alive.
10.
Seattle just fell in love with the Mariners that year. They tied it up on the last day of the season, forcing a 1-game playoff.
That's one of the races people point to now when a team is far back late in the season. They say, well, the Mariners came back in '95.
The Seattle Mariners are the champions of the American League West. Fueled by Ken Griffey Jr.'s electric smile and the solid professionalism of Edgar Martinez, the Mariners made an amazing comeback. In a pivotal September stretch, Seattle won 10 of 11, while the collapsing Angels lost 10 of 11. In a one-game playoff, the M's had Randy Johnson on the mound.
When the Angels blew the 13-game lead in 1995, I mean, that's tough. That is tough to do in August.
Here is a team that has had a reputation through the years with, Donnie Moore and other things that had happened. The Angels had been known as a team that collapsed.
This franchise, up until they finally got their win, but they were sort of a mini version of the Cubs and the Red Sox for a long time.
When you look back at the way that the Angels played in those last weeks of the 1995 season, when they finally got to that game, the Angels had absolutely no chance.
I only remember one play from that game was Luis Sojo, who would become a folk hero for the Yankees in later years, had a measly little hit.
Now the broken bat. It's fair!
Goes underneath one of the benches in the bullpen there. Guys are circling the bases like a track meet.
And here comes Sojo!
Seeing Mark Langston face down at home plate and thinking if he could just dig his way down through the dirt and disappear, that he would have.
And if you could pick one person to give the ball to for one game, who better than Randy Johnson?
If people didn't understand who Randy Johnson was before that game, they really understood after the game.
To me, there's nothing like it when a team wins for the first time.
Just a great moment for Seattle baseball. That really put baseball on the map.
9.
Justice makes the catch. What a play!
You're never going to have two teams that are that good, 200-win teams, that won't both make the playoffs.
The pitch to Bonds, hit high and deep to right field. David Justice back to the wall. It's gone.
If a team could win 103 games and finish second, maybe we need to do something to allow them to get into the postseason.
The Giants fortified themselves with the acquisition of Barry Bonds, a free agent, before the '93 season. Surely they thought that would be enough to overtake the Braves.
The Giants are going to sign Bonds. No, really.
Wow! Barry Bonds!
We had a core of a very, very, very good team. And then Barry came and it gave us like a heck of a lift, not only offensively, but defensively too.
Bonds with the backhanded catch. Nice job.
It really wasn't much of a race for most of the year until Atlanta picked up Freddie McGriff.
Goes deep this time. He sends Gilkey back to the wall. He can't get it. Home run, Fred McGriff.
Their entire season changed around once Fred McGriff got on board. It's the greatest second-half comeback in history.
You see 25 guys who are really having fun playing baseball and are committed to putting all the other stuff aside and working toward catching the Giant.
But when you look back at it, it's incredible to think you got Maddox, who's this real control master. You got Glavine, who's the lefty, who's the ice water and the veins guy, and Smoltz is the power pitcher.
The pennant race came down to the last day, and I remember the Braves they had won their last game, and they were watching on the Jumbotron.
Down the left field line, Martinez fly ball. This season is over. The Atlanta Braves win it as the Dodgers take the final game 12-1 against the Giants.
It was a great season. We had a lot of fun, and it ended really, really hard.
8.
Probably the greatest series I played in was the final 3 games of the regular season, in which we were 3 games behind Houston as they came into Dodger Stadium.
That season was 1980, and the Dodgers swept the Astros to force a one-game playoff for the NL West crown.
I don't remember anybody in Dodger Stadium being in their seat. They were on their feet.
And the Dodger crowd again rising.
The Dodgers had to win all 3 to force a playoff. And we did just that.
Heroism by Joe Ferguson and Ron Say with extra inning and late inning home runs.
I beat Nolan Ryan on Sunday. That forced a playoff on Monday. But a big question, who was Lasorda going to pitch on Monday?
If Fernando hadn't relieved a couple of days prior to that, I would have started him. And I started Dave Goltz.
But it wasn't Gold's day. It was Art Howe's day.
4-0 on Howe's 10th home run of the season.
Houston won it 7-1.
The 1-1 pitch. A bouncing ball to the right side. Bergman has it, steps on first, and the Astros have won the National League West.
That broke my heart.
And of course, on the other side, you've got Tommy Lasorda, who's tasted the bitter and the sweet as the Dodgers remain in the dugout.
But still, the question remains, what if Fernando had pitched that game?
One game had to tell it all.
7-7-7-7.
It's September 23rd, 1908. The Cubs and the Giants at that time were the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry of our time. They're playing in the Polo Grounds in New York, 1-1, bottom of the ninth.
Moose McCormick was on third base, and Fred Merkle was on first.
Al Bridewell singled to win the game, the winning run scores from third, and Merkle, as was the complete custom of the times, did not touch second base.
Johnny Evers, this Cubs second baseman, he calls to the outfielder. He says, "Give me the ball, give me the ball."
Evers went and jumped up and down on the bag and waved his arms around so the umpire would see him, and he called Merkle out.
His knowledge of the rules helped win the Cubs a pennant.
Fred Merkle was 19 and in his second season with the Giants when he made dubious history. NL President Harry Pulliam ruled the game a tie, and the contest was replayed at the end of the season. The Cubs defeated Christy Mathewson 4-2 to earn the pennant.
7-7.
Everyone remembers it for one thing, the so-called Merkle's boner, which is one of the most unfair designations in the history of sports.
Baseball is a game of rules, and if you don't abide by the rules, then you usually get called out.
There's no question that Fred Merkle was the victim of overzealous adjudication, if you will.
Fred Merkle was a haunted man after this, entirely undeservedly so.
6-6-6.
The Cardinals lost 4 straight in the final week of the 49th season, and the Dodgers, with MVP Jackie Robinson and Rookie of the Year Don Newcomb, capitalized and took a 1-game lead.
We had to win the last game of the season in Philadelphia, or we would have been in a tie with the Cardinals.
At Philadelphia Sky Park for that final game with the Phils, you'd think you were in Evans Field. All Flatbush seems to be represented.
They were all Dodger fans, and they were all pulling for the Dodgers.
That's manager Bert Shelton with the slightly partisan headline.
Late in the game, I got a base hit off Kenny Heinzelman to center field that drove in the winning run.
From the 10th inning, Captain Pee Wee Reed slides home with the tally that puts the books ahead for Keith.
They had this knack for inducing coronaries in their most devoted fans, and the Dodgers won on the last day of the season.
5-5-5.
Every 15 years, you're rewarded with a pennant race that is like a marathon. And 67 may have been the best in the modern era.
Until Friday night of the final of the regular season, there were 4 teams involved, and the White Sox were eliminated on Friday night. This left 3 teams involved over the weekend.
As we went into Fenway Park, the last series, with a 1-game lead and 2 games to play.
I hurt my arm on Saturday, had to leave that game. I think Yaz hit a 3-run homer.
So we win that game. Detroit and the Angels split. So whoever wins our game on Sunday between Minnesota and Boston, they'll be the champions unless Detroit wins a doubleheader, and then there'd be a playoff.
On the season's last day, the Red Sox, with Yaz going 4 for 4, beat the Twins, with whom they'd been tied for first.
Adair will score.
And when Detroit lost the second game of a doubleheader, Boston had its impossible dream.
The 1967 race, in my mind, comes down to one player, Carl Yastrzemski.
Not only did he wind up winning the Triple Crown, but of those 126 RBIs, it seemed in your mind at 100 of them won games.
Taking a team that had finished in 9th place the year before and putting it on his back, Yastrzemski seemed to turn the model on its head and make it more like basketball, like Wilt Chamberlain scoring 100 points.
The amazing thing was that they kept pitching to him almost as they didn't believe that he was doing what he was doing.
There was never a more valuable player to a team in any season.
He was a real leader on the team. He had a knack of pumping the guys up.
I've been here for 7 years, and this is, without a doubt, the greatest ball club that ever was on the field.
I can remember doing interviews in '67, the last month of the season, and national media coming up to me after the game saying, how can you take this pressure? I said, pressure? I said, for the first time, I've enjoyed the game again.
The '67 team, even though they didn't win the World Series, I think, began this modern era of Red Sox baseball. And the fact that no one expected this team to do anything when the season started made it a Cinderella story.
That they call it the impossible dream, I believe it was.
There's never been a season as exciting as 1948.
34,000 watched the Cleveland Indians and the Boston Red Sox battle it out in the first postseason pennant playoff in American League history.
With 9 days left, the 1948 American League pennant chase was a three-way deadlock between Cleveland, Boston, and New York. On the final weekend, the Indians lost 2 of 3, while the Red Sox swept the Yankees in a 2-game series, setting up the playoff.
The Red Sox were feeling confident because they'd won the coin toss. They were playing at Fenway Park.
And the feeling was the Red Sox were really going to romp in this game. Home field, Ted Williams. Turned out Cleveland had that one-game magic and did it.
We had some very good, real professional players that didn't mind the pressure, and Boudreau was a great leader.
Lou Boudreau, player-manager of the team, went 4 for 4 in this game with 2 home runs and 2 doubles, and led his team to an 8-3 victory.
Without him, they would not have won the 1948 pennant. And that was the first pennant the Indians had won in 28 years.
The Indians were a great team, and they went on to win the World Series. But what it denied was a chance for not a Subway Series, a Kenmore Square Series, because, of course, the Braves were a half a mile away over at Braves Field.
3.
There will never be another collapse, I think, in any sport that will ever rival the 1964 Phillies.
With a dozen games to play in 1964, the Phillies owned a 6.5-game lead. Manager Gene Mauch went for the jugular and overworked ace pitchers Chris Short and Jim Bunning. The strategy failed. The Phillies lost 10 straight and wobbled home, tied for second with Cincinnati, a game behind the Cardinals.
What was Gene Mauch thinking? Pitching Bunning and Short, and Bunning and Short, and Bunning and Short.
I think all Gene had to do was let one of the other pitchers pitch.
Well, I think what Gene was trying to do is he was trying to win and give everybody a rest.
I can't recall another situation where the manager really bore so much personal responsibility.
The manager has to get blamed. The manager got a lot of credit when they won. He was the boy wonder, and that's part of being the head man.
I think Gene's basic problem was sometimes he would overmanage.
Maybe I overdid it. I don't really know. I did everything the way I did everything during my life. I did everything by the seat of my pants.
A man on first base, 1 man out. Get these 2 hitters out. That's all we want. Come on.
We the one that have to win the game for him. He's the manager, we the players. I bring to the players, to us.
You know, what really hurt more than anything else, I think, is when Chico DeRee stole home with Mahaffey pitching and Robinson up at the plate.
We had Art Mahaffey pitching a 0-0 ball game against the Cincinnati Reds.
All of a sudden, Ruiz, on his own, breaks from third, and Mahaffey fires a ball to the backstop.
Now, if he'd have thrown the ball at Frank or inside where Frank couldn't swing it, he's a dead bird.
They lose the game 1-0, and that was how the 10-game losing streak started.
But when you go back and start thinking about the Cincinnati Reds and the St. Louis Cardinals, they won 10 games in a row, too.
Cardinals were a hell of a team. They really were. But they should have never been allowed to be acclaimed as a hell of a team. We should have gotten it over with where they would have to be a hell of a team later on, not in 1964.
2.
Backer throws. There's a long strike. It's going to be, I believe, the Giants from the pennant. The Giants from the pennant. The Giants from the pennant.
A pennant was won on the very last swing of the bat. It was the most famous walk-off home run in the history of baseball.
Going into the second game of a doubleheader on August 11th, 1951, the Dodgers led the Giants by 13.5 games. New York then launched a 37-7 closing run, and Brooklyn needed a 14th-inning home run from Jackie Robinson against the Phillies on the season's final day to force a best-of-3 playoff.
We played over 500 ball, and they still tied us at the end of the season.
Then they went into this playoff series, best of three, where the Giants won the first game, the Dodgers won the second one, and then it moved to the third game in the Polo Grounds, where, of course, Bobby Thompson hit the home run.
I got to home plate, and I look out, there's Branca. I hadn't even known that they had changed pitches.
Last of the ninth, Branca pitches.
And he threw the first pitch right through the middle, and he took it. And the next pitch, I tried to throw up in there.
Branca throws. There's a long strike. It's going to be, I believe.
I didn't get it in enough, I guess. So he hit it down the line in the Polo Grounds, which was not too far.
Bobby Thompson hits into the very back of the left field stand. The Giants win the pennant.
I didn't realize what had happened. I was the last guy to get to home plate, and I'm on deck.
And they're going crazy. They're going crazy.
I got within leaping distance of home plate, and I'd never done that before. And I took one big jump.
I don't remember going from the mound to the clubhouse, and that's a long walk.
I still think it's the greatest game of all time. I think 100 years from now, you're going to be hearing, the Giants win the pennant! The Giants win the pennant!
I can't tell you whether I heard it then or I've heard it so many times now that I think I did.
Giants win a pennant. Ad nauseum. You know, he said it like 9 times.
New York Giants, Brooklyn Dodgers. I always thought of it as a fierce rivalry and great era in baseball.
Welcome back to Who's Number One and the 20 greatest pennant races of all time. Let's recap. 1914 Miracle Braves. 1908 Tigers win by half a game. 1904 Boston edges New York. 1946 Cardinals Dodgers playoff. 1980 Phillies Expos. 1950 Whiz Kids. 1969 Miracle Mets. 1956 Dodgers. 1942 Cards Dodgers. 1962 Giants win 3-game playoff. 1995 Seattle wins playoff. 1993 Braves Giants. 1980 Houston over LA in playoff. 1908 Merkel blunder. 1949 Dodgers Cards. 1967 Boston's impossible dream. 1948 Cleveland Boston. 1964 Phillies collapse. 1951 Giants Dodgers. You know, there's no time limit or crying in baseball, but there is a time limit on this show, and we're getting to it. So here it is, the best pennant race ever.
One.
In 1978, the Yankees did what the New York Giants had done 27 years earlier.
Like a summer breeze, the Red Sox rippled through the 1978 season. Their front-running success all the sweeter because their detested rivals, the Yankees, were in turmoil. But New York rallied and took over first place. Then Boston re-rallied, and it all came down to a one-game playoff.
The last time we saw the Yankees on the field in '77, Reggie Jackson hit 3 home runs off 3 pitchers on 3 different pitches.
The team fell apart early in '78. Boston got off to an incredible start.
We had a 12 to 13, 14 game lead, and I never once thought we were 13 games better than the Yankees that year.
Don Zimmer, who was manager, was a terrific third base coach. It's not easy to blow a 14-game lead after July 20th.
We went into Boston, had to play 4 games in Fenway, and we swept them all 4.
And it was is known as the Boston Massacre, and it allowed us to catch them. We came out of that series tied up with maybe 3 weeks of the season remaining.
We had to win the last 8 games of the season to wind up in a tie.
The one-game playoff in 1978, best game I ever saw.
1 game to settle for the whole season. Bucky Dent hit the home run, and we lost.
Deep to left. Yastrzemski will not get it. It's a home run. A 3-run home run for Bucky Dent. The Yankees now lead it by a score.
If it had been Reggie Jackson or somebody else, they would have been able to deal with it. But to have Bucky Dent hit a home run like this.
So shocking. So out of nowhere. So Bucky Dent. The guy's name is Bucky Dent.
It feels good because they remember.
Goose Gotts has faced Yastrzemski for the final out of the game.
The last guy that I, as a pitcher, probably would want to face in that situation, a left-handed hitter, me being a right-handed pitcher.
Popped up. That might be it. Nettles over at third base.
We had the game won about 2 or 3 different times, and it was a very tough loss.
And the Yankees win the 1978 American League Eastern Pennant.
It just didn't seem fair that there had to be a loser that day because there was so much respect up from us toward the Red Sox and vice versa.
No doubt about it, a baseball season is a grinder. 162 games, sometimes even more. You got rain delays, rainouts, and extra innings. A test of endurance and patience. And then, just when fatigue sets in, you find yourself in a pennant race. Those races are what ESPN Classic ranked and what we're submitting for assessment to our resident second-guessers, the shrinking violet, Bert Sugar, and the master of take 2 and hit to right, Nick Eccacella.
Greatest pennant races. That's an interesting subject. You know what my problem here is? You're gonna have to help me. Number 2 should be number 1 on this.
Well, there's no question. Let's just start right there.
All right.
Let's just start right there.
Now I'll
Only
root for New
people
York.
under the age of 50 could possibly pick 78 Red Sox Yankees over 51 Dodgers Giants. You've got a team that's 13 and a half games behind in the middle of August. They come back to tie, and the Dodgers had to tie the Giants with some dramatics by Jackie Robinson on the last day of the season.
Down in Philadelphia.
You go into a 3-game playoff. You're down 4-1 in the 9th inning in the 3rd game of the playoff, and you win the game. No, I'm sorry. That's number 1, and it may even be number 1 and number 2.
Oh, I give it both.
Yes.
I give it both for the pennant race and the playoff.
Oh, it absolutely.
Bobby Thompson's home run caps it, but there were
Single greatest moment in the history of baseball.
But there were so many little things going on. Yeah. That was the greatest pennant race.
No question. I have some problems with this list. 1908 is number 7.
Well, there are 2 1908s.
Now, exactly.
There's an American League and a National
League, right.
I mean, the National League is epitomized by Merkles-Boner, which forces a playoff game.
Which may very well have to be number 2 ahead of the 78 Yankees-Red Sox race.
No, that moves up there sufficiently. Go to the American League. You have 3 teams, Cleveland, Detroit, and Chicago, with 2 days left. Yeah. There is 1 percentage point between them.
Right. And the Tigers won by half a game.
Yes, over Cleveland.
Which is pretty bizarre. 1956 is too low, I think. That's a 3-team I mean, how many times do you see a 3-team
Well, how about
race
the impossible year, 67?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got
That's
going...
the Red Sox, though.
Well, you're also appealing to the Minnesota fans and the Detroit fans and the Chicago
Minnesota fans weren't too happy with that year.
Oh, no.
It turned out.
There were 4 teams.
Yeah, there were 4 teams.
That were this close with a week to go.
But in 56, you rarely see a pennant race where second place team is 1 game out, third place team is 2 games out. That's number 13 may not be high enough for that.
Yeah, but we saw that in 08. We saw that.
Yeah. I got one that beats them all.
Go ahead.
1915 in the Federal League, which was a major league for 2 years. The Chicago Whales won the pennant by 1 percentage point.
The
Federal League was a major league for 2 years, so we're going to talk about the major leagues.
I must be in the wrong place. The Federal League.
The Federal League, yes. They won the pennant by 1 percentage point over St. Louis, with Pittsburgh a half a game out. Now, that's a pennant race. I think that has to be on the list somewhere. I mean, where else?
All right, put it on the list. If it'll keep you quiet,
point.
I'll put it on the list.
That's not going to keep me quiet. I'm not done. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Today, the pennant race is diluted by the postseason because you've got so many strata.
Mm-hmm. And the wild card has diluted it even further.
A playoff is not a pennant, and it is just one more tier. A pennant is a pennant is a pennant, to misquote Gertrude Stein.
Mm-hmm. It's a whole different Whole different philosophy.
So when we're talking pennant races, is the winner of an Eastern Division hypothetically a pennant winner?
Well, no. He's got to then play the NLCS. Yeah.
Good. Then some of these on this list don't
Some of
qualify.
these don't qualify. Yeah.
In conclusion, some don't qualify.
And the 1915 Whales have to be at least number 10.
And that'll do it for this edition of Who's Number One. Thanks for joining us for ESPN Classic's ranking of the 20 best pennant races of all time. We'll be back to continue our countdown of the teams, the athletes, and the events that have shaped our world in sports. Until then, I'm Trey Wingo. Let the debating begin.